who is really behind the ongoing turmoil in Israel and Palestine. The Middle East has been a hotbed for strife for generations, but what if someone is stirring the pot for personal and financial gain? The answer may surprise you, but what might shock you even more is that they're doing this all out in the open. The Middle East seems to always be at war with themselves, with the border disputes between Palestine and Israel at the center of the ongoing conflict. The area has been desired and fought over by some of the most famous historical kings and generals, including Alexander the Great, King Xerxes of Persia, and General Titus of the Roman Empire. Since the nation was formally refounded in May of 1948, the conflict has continued in the modern day, as Israel and their neighbors have fought physical and ideological wars over border, religion, and culture. Or have they? On the surface, it may seem that the conflict in the region is based on national borders being drawn where there were not natural cultural divides. If we were to compare the conflict to cultural border wars in Eastern Europe, one could argue that attempting to divide people where they are not culturally divided will cause headaches and heartaches alike. However, if we gaze a little deeper into the conflict, we will see it is clear someone is pulling the strings. Someone is intentionally stirring up the fighting. But who? And why? What could anyone possibly have to gain from instability and constant loss of life? There are several possible beneficiaries. The first option is the Zionist Movement. Widely believed to be Nazi and Soviet propaganda, the concept of the Zionist order has been circulating since the early 20th century. This theory claims that there is a group of powerful Jewish families who are involved in the deep machinations of industries such as finance, manufacturing, and consumer distribution. Considering their heritage, they are naturally inclined to root for a free, independent, and regionally dominant Israel. The Zionist movement is purported to be working around the world on Israel's behalf. These families utilize their circles of influence to not only protect Israel's people and interests, but to expand their borders and establish them as the sole inheritors of the area. There are some who believe that the Zionists will not allow for lasting peace to be achieved in the Middle East until Israel is awarded the land and borders that they think they deserve. In the meantime, they utilize the conflict to further their capital interests, allowing the money they make from the ongoing fighting to indirectly fund itself. Another possible benefactor of the Israeli conflict is, of course, the New World Order. The NWO is believed to be a shadow government, of sorts, operating as a global movement, pulling the strings everywhere in secret. Those who back up this theory claim that the New World Order has been linked to American politics, industries like Big Pharma and Big Oil, and seemingly apolitical groups such as news media and media distribution companies. The surface-level reasons for the members of the NWO to be invested in continuous conflict in the Middle East are obvious. Those who control the various industries have a perpetual money-making machine if the conflict never sees a real conclusion. Media companies can continue selling content and ad space. Big Pharma can continue selling triage equipment and trauma supplies, and so on. However, there could be more to their motivations than first meets the eye. Given how deep their connections go to global politics, the entire conflict could be nothing more than a smokescreen. While the origins of the divide arguably go back thousands of years, it does seem rather suspicious that the fighting is still going on today. In the age of diplomacy and information, it appears intentional for the turmoil in the Middle East continues to blaze on, with no end in sight. Those who adhere to the New World Order theory purport that what we are witnessing is the world's longest magic trick. It's an act of sleight of hand. While the world continues to focus on the senseless violence in the region, they can quietly accomplish their goals everywhere else in the world. Do they need rules and regulations passed neatly and quietly? Stir the pot in Israel. Do they need to take the eyes of the world off the indiscretions of one of their members? Kick the hornet's nest, and within 24 hours, the news cycle will have forgotten all about the scandal. The NWO theory fits conveniently with many global events, in hindsight. Suspicious elections have been overshadowed by renewed conflict in Gaza time and time again. Scandals involving public figures and political leaders have often been overlooked due to a well-timed rocket strike from Hamas. While many can attribute these events to coincidence, there are many who believe they are timed too far perfectly to be merely coincidental. Possibly the most concerning answer to the question remains unspoken. What could possibly be more concerning than a shadow government running the show? Well, truthfully, if the New World Order is pulling the strings, they seem to be willing to let the fighting die down from time to time. They do not blast the region to smithereens for no reason. The scariest option would be a group that would senselessly stir up trouble, all in the name of the almighty dollar. Who would be heartless enough to put monetary gain above the lives of thousands of innocent people? Who would be greedy enough to sacrifice an entire portion of the world to the war machine for financial success? To answer that question, we turn to Wall Street in New York City. The American Stock Exchange is a surprisingly good source of insight and information, if you know where to look. How does the stock market relate to the conflict in Israel and Palestine? 2 words: arms companies. Many of the largest arms companies in the world are publicly traded entities, including Lockheed Martin. Tracking their quarterly reports, one can predictably find that when conflicts arise around the world, their sales go up. During times of peace, countries and militias stock up their munitions, but only to a certain point. When shots are not being fired, there is no need to replenish spent rounds. So while companies like Lockheed and Raytheon can expect to sell to entities that are looking to increase or upgrade their stockpiles, without warfare, their sales begin to dwindle. So there is a vested interest in perpetual conflicts. There will always be conflicts such as the war in Ukraine that keep them busy, but eventually those always come to an end. They realized a long time ago they needed something that could go on forever. Israel and Palestine are incredibly small, especially when compared to superpowers such as the United States and Russia. However, Israel has possibly the most technologically advanced and well-armed military force in the world. They live smack dab in the middle of all their enemies. It was not a difficult task to upsell them on their armament. Israel has the most advanced air defense system on the planet, the Iron Dome. This system is designed and maintained by an Israeli defense company. However, they do not work alone. Many of the individual components of the system are designed and manufactured by outside interests, including Raytheon. These companies are constantly upgrading and updating their products because they know that if it works better than what's already in use, Israel will buy it on sight. Israel has had to focus on their air defense systems for decades. Rocket strikes have, in the modern age, been a nearly constant struggle with their neighbors. Furthermore, rocket strikes have often been the instigating incidents for renewed conflict between them. So any company or conglomerate that is able to sell to Israel knows they have a customer for life. On top of that, Israel has powerful and wealthy allies. In 2021 alone, the United States approved a grant of $1 billion for Israel's defense fund. The amount of money that flows through Israel and into the global defense network is astronomical. Not only are allies gifting money directly to the country for their defense fund, but they will give actual equipment as well. The United States is known for not directly entering conflicts around the world, but rather giving countries their support weapons and arms, and free training on how to use the equipment. Once again, using the conflict in Ukraine as an example, the United States has not formally entered the war. They have not submitted soldiers to fight, nor have they engaged the Russian army directly. However, they have given Ukraine an unholy amount of weapons, munitions, and training to defend themselves against their aggressors. In Israel's case, the United States has been doing this basically from the beginning. They will take things from their weapons stockpile and simply give them to Israel. Usually this is because the US is looking to buy something new, like when a dad on TV is shopping for a new family car and he gives the old car to the oldest kid. When the United States gives their munitions and arms away, those defense companies know for a fact that there is a significant purchase on the horizon. Once again, these defense companies have a vested interest in continued conflict. Even though the US is not directly involved in the fighting, as long as the fighting continues, the US will be contributing to the armament of the Israeli forces. So how do these companies keep this conflict going? Of course they benefit from the fighting, but how do they keep things hot? They have investors to keep happy, so the simple answer is they do anything they have to. These companies have their hands deeply in the pockets of politicians around the world. They push for governmental action that leads to weapons sales, but not outright involvement from the major powers. They push for the US to send weapons to the Middle East, but not to enter the conflict directly. They lobby for the right to sell to whoever they want, regardless of that group's relationship to the rest of the world. This is possibly the most influential element of the defense industry's involvement in the Israel-Palestine conflict. They sell bigger and better weapons to both sides and claim they are just the shopkeepers. They stir the pot by giving both sides the confidence they need to keep fighting back, but they lock them in a stalemate by not selling them anything that could tip the scales too far in one direction. The weapons companies recognize that the method pharma companies took to illness could be applied to warfare. As long as you treat the symptoms, you never have to cure the disease. If they provide the supplies for both sides to defend themselves, but never let one side get too overpowered, they can simply stoke the socio-political fires anytime sales start to dip. The Israel-Palestine conflict has endured for generations and will likely continue for a very long time. There are several possible groups that would benefit from perpetual fighting in the Middle East. In truth, it's entirely possible that more than one of these possibilities is true at the same time. Any combination of these potential schemers makes for a plausible source of continued conflict. But what do you think? Who's behind the continued fighting in the Middle East? Let us know in the comments. If you like what we're doing here, make sure to show that like button some love and consider subscribing to the channel so you never miss out on an episode. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.